And welcome back to the Women of Water Get Real virtual summit, where we are talking about when and where and why women are leaking from the water career pipeline, how we can stop those leaks, how we can even bring women back. And today we have, originally the idea was we were going to have an all women summit. And along the way, we wanted to have a lot of intersectionality and bring in different perspectives, including LGBTQ. And I had reached out to someone who has been a very active member in the community and in American Water Works Association, one of the biggest water industry associations, and to see if we could find someone. And he actually offered to be one of our speakers as a trans man who can give us very different many different perspectives on working in water. And this is Ari Copeland, who has really been a stellar member and rising member in the water community. So glad to have you here, Ari. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks you for having me. It's an honor, really. So
You get to be our token man.
I mean, I'm fine with that, and I don't care. I think I have the experience. That's really all that matters, really, at the end of the day. So
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Well, and so we were starting to talk about and I think for a lot of people, just dealing with gender in the workplace in general,
Mhm.
it's still something a lot of people struggle with. And it is still a predominantly cis white male community. And and that's something that's been coming up. When I was coming up as a water professional, it was one of the goals was kind of to be one of the boys, right? Yeah, tuck your hair up under your hat and try to fit in. And now we have a lot more expression of different gender identities and whatnot. So
Mhm.
you might, just lay of the land, like how, what's changed and what would be helpful for people to know about um, LGBTQ in the workplace, and especially with trans men and women.
Yeah. So
Um,
and trans people, transgender is just an umbrella term. It includes a lot of different people. It includes people who don't identify within the binary as well. So my experience is just one of many trans people, and they're all different. So that's what I always tell people before I start. I'm just one voice of the community. Even if you talk to, I use the term queer, that could also be offensive. I embrace queer, so I call myself queer. But for me, I kind of, not only am I a gender minority, I'm also, my sexual orientation is also minority because I'm pansexual too. So, and all that means is I don't care about people's gender. If I like you, I like you. If I don't, I don't. It's pretty basic to me. I don't care how you identify, because at the end of the day, it has nothing to do with me. So that's my little like spiel on me. So, I mean, I started working in the water industry like around 2005. So I have a traditional background, so I have civil environmental engineering background, which a lot of people that are probably talking on this summit probably have, or they're chemical engineers, or they're scientists, or whatever. I don't know. I'm assuming that's the case. 95% or more are probably those folks. So, and there's nothing wrong with that. But yeah, so I started working around 2005, working for a consultant. And I pretty much worked being perceived as a woman probably until 2011, 2012-ish. It's kind of hard to say. I mean, I started medically transitioning in 2009, but I didn't tell my employer when in 2009. So that was interesting. It's kind of a fun social experiment to see if engineers will actually say anything. 2 years and they didn't say anything. So I think it's kind of interesting in and of itself. So, it's very much like a don't ask, don't tell kind of mentality. It pretty much still is for the most part.
right.
And it's because it's regional. It just depends on where you live. Like, and I've lived in 9 states, so I feel like I know this because I've lived in, the East Coast, the Midwest, Mountain Time, because I lived in Colorado for a little bit. Now I live in Northern California. So all those places of being queer is very different, because when I transitioned, I was living in Florida, And if anyone watches the news, Florida historically is not really super friendly to people like me, or really anybody different. Let's just be real. So I love Florida. Water professionals are awesome, but the politics are not for me. So anyways, I mean, for me, I understand what it's like to be perceived as female in a very highly technical specialty that is mostly, as we say, male dominated. Like I've worked in offices where I was the only female perceived person in a technical role versus like having, support staff that are generally female positions such as admin staff and accounting and things of that nature. So it's definitely a different experience. And I've also experienced what it's like to not have anyone know what I am. So from looking at me and talking to me. And then I also know what it's like, obviously, to live in the space I'm in now. So, it's just very different. So it's all the realms of gender possibilities, or at least perception wise. Not that I identify as non-binary or any of that, and I don't claim to, but I understand when people can't identify you, how they treat you, and how that's very different. So for me, like, I feel like most of my story will, and resonate with most of the female participants. It's not really, I'm not telling you anything new and fascinating. It's stuff you already experienced. But for me, I had the element of my sexuality on top of that, because before I transitioned, I actually identified as a lesbian. So I've had a lot of transition in a lot of the ways I view myself or accept myself. So sexual orientation is not a choice, but I feel like some people don't have clarity in how they identify. So it's a journey for a lot of people, and it's okay to be questioning. A lot of people are. So that, I would say, I was questioning for a lot of my life. So a lot of things that were hard for me is I work in a very O&M specific field. So I work primarily mostly with men. So, when I was viewed as a woman, the conversations would be very different. They would assume that I wouldn't know what they know, and sometimes that was true because of cultural reasons, because women are generally encouraged to go into mechanical related careers. And I'm 42, so go back 35 years ago or whatever, whenever we start school, that's very true. So if you remember that narrative, you probably say, yeah, all right, I get you, because you're probably all the same age range as me. It's my guess, or mostly. So, for me, they would just talk to me like I didn't understand, or they wouldn't, they would talk to me. They had their own, like, they felt their own comfortability. Let's just put it that way. Very comfortable talking to men because they would assume men would have similar mechanical intelligence or skills, which is not necessarily true. Men are just really good at faking it sometimes, like I am sometimes. So, and then how I had to behave had to be, not as aggressive. I had to figure out non-aggressive ways of communicating with men to get things that I needed or needed to get done on projects, and utilize that way of communicating to get work done, versus like now I can pretty much just behave not as great, and people consider that normal, or they say, oh, that guy's a real jerk, but it's not something that's going to get me fired, really. It's like almost expected. Yeah. It's like, oh, okay, you work in construction, so you have to be like this, gonna pound my fist on the table if stuff doesn't get done kind of person. So, and then, in between, when people didn't know what I was, that was a very scary time, because a lot of people would stare at me or say inappropriate things or ask me, questions that, you really shouldn't ask other people, really. That have nothing to do with working, or really, I wouldn't ask you those questions. So why would you ask me? Like, what bathroom I go to? Like, what am I working with? Like, those things are not really essential for a work environment. It doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, gender doesn't dictate mental capacity or ability. So that's how I kind of talk to people about that. I'm like, well, does it matter what anatomy I have? Because that doesn't really dictate my capability in this role. So
I think that's true for most of the, all
right.
the women.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
that's what I'm saying. I'm like, well, this is
just
bizarre. Yeah, it's just
Right.
bizarre.
Right.
So, but whatever. I kind of just scrape it up to like curiosity being misdirected. So I'm just like, hey, it sounds like Google is your friend on this one. I don't know. Like, you know what I mean? It's just like, I don't think it's come from a mean place, but
have you had to deal with like open hostility or situations where you didn't feel safe out
oh
at
yeah.
a plant or something?
Yeah, not everyone gets to that. That's kind of what we were talking about before we started recording. Is I like to control. I mean, don't be wrong, people can Google and find out what I am, but I like to control to a certain degree who I disclose that to. So there's instances where I'm alone with people or vehicles with people, and I don't necessarily feel safe telling those people, especially depending on what they're talking about, because for some reason, and it's just country, like, you know, when you have any polarization or people don't understand and they just talk about topics and they think that they're talking to someone that's like them, right? Because that's really it. When they see me, they're like, "Oh, this guy's like a Bubba, like me," you know, or like just a
Right.
good, you know what I mean? Like they're assuming my experience is the same, that I was raised in a similar way culturally. I understand the same things and have the same opinions about things, and even if I don't, I won't say anything
Mhm.
contrary because I'm fearful I won't like blend into this pack mentality, right? So depending on what they're saying to me, I don't necessarily feel safe disclosing that. Sometimes, I mean, honestly, most of the time it's not relevant anyways. But I kind of just like usually redirect it and say, hey, you never know who those people could be, like you're talking about. They're like, oh, there's not any of those people around. And that usually makes me laugh my butt off because I'm just like, oh, yeah, sure there isn't. But, you know, we should think about what we say because that impacts other
You
people.
can
And
always tell, yeah.
yeah, and that's part of being respectful, right? And same with if you're talking about any gender, like women, like making pre-assumptions about what people could do based on what they are is never beneficial. So I always try to
Right.
redirect it in a general way. I'll always say something, but it won't be necessarily tied to me. So in that way, it's kind of similar. Like my experience is kind of similar to like still in that feminine, you know, when I was perceived as a woman, because I feel a lot of women don't feel empowered to address sexism because of retaliation or fear.
Yeah.
So I definitely get that. So I still live in that world. So
Yeah. And that's, I think that's something that's really come up a lot. And I think, white women especially, Black women or women of color often, they go into a situation knowing that, they get the armor on. They're ready for it.
right,
And I think sometimes with white women it's like, in a mostly white environment, it's sort of, you get into a team, it's almost like a family environment, fathers, brothers, and everything, and
mhm.
you think you get along, and then, but don't get out of line.
Yeah,
Don't
correct,
get ahead of yourself. Don't
right,
don't try
yeah,
to be more than you are. You know.
right, yeah. If you try to be aggressive or behave the way a man does, then you're aggressive or you're a bitch. Let's just be honest with ourselves. Or if you're a person of color, you're an angry black lady. Let's just be real. That's what it is. That's what people say.
This
And
is
I
it.
don't.
That's
Yeah,
right.
I don't have to deal with that. Like race is not a component of what I deal with day to day. I'm a white person. So
Oh my
it's
God.
just a
Yeah.
layer of privilege that I get to use to combat some of that stuff. So it's just like, no, I don't think she's being an angry black lady. I think she's emotional and I think it's warranted based on what's going on. And maybe we should listen to what she has to say. See, those are the ways you redirect that kind of stuff when people start saying those things. Or like you were saying, a lot of women felt the pressure to fit in because they felt that was the way to advance. It's like, yeah, I mean, you definitely, there's a lot of pressure for anybody that doesn't fit like a cultural setting or a norm to assimilate into that. But really, at the end of the day, that's fitting and it's not belonging. So that's what I tell people. It's like, well, if this environment is embracing how you're different, then maybe it's not an environment you want to be in. And I think that's really the key to the water industry is that we're historically not good at that.
Right.
Yeah, we're not.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. And so, that's really where this summit came from is, that there was yet another study coming together, funded by men, controlled with the outcomes already predetermined by
Right,
men, nominally headed by a woman, but it was like, well, my funders want this. And
right.
and this idea that it's all about young people, it's all about let's just cram more women into the pipeline, let's just inspire more grade
Yeah,
school girls and get them to major in STEM in college and everything, like that's going to take care of everything. And then, well, when they get older, well, let's give them, lactation rooms and childcare facilities,
sure.
and because that's all you need.
Right,
And then teach them confidence, and it's this whole double-edged sword that,
right,
yeah, confident, you got to be a leader, but when
right,
you do learn leadership skills, and I went to an Ivy League school, we learned
right,
leadership, we were expected to lead the nation,
right,
and yet, uh it's like, well, you wouldn't want this job, you'd be bored,
right,
you wouldn't want to
right,
work for someone younger than you, or
right.
whatever, it's like I can't give back the PhD, and I'm not going to.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's a similar, being a trans person is, there's still aspects of the things you talked about that are still enculturated in me because I was raised as female, so that'll never go away. So the
Right.
messaging that, I deal with that just like women do, like don't make yourself too big, or that's very off-putting to the majority, right? Or don't do these things, or if you're too aggressive, you're considered bossy or a bitch, right? Like that's just what it is. So for trans people, a lot of the barriers, trans men, trans women, non-binary people, a lot of the struggles are very similar. Is just being, getting the things that you need, usually healthcare wise, is a real challenge. And women historically have things that help trans people help women, things that help women help trans people. It's just, that's just how it is. Like if you actually design a workplace around people who are the most marginalized, or people who haven't historically been a part of the industry, then everybody benefits from it. So, and men do too. They just don't know. Like I talked to a lot of men about this. They just don't know because they don't look at how their system, or how the system's been created around them, actually hurts them too. So we tell
Mm-hmm.
men that they have to be certain all the time. They have to lead all the time. That takes a humongous toll on your mental health, which is why you see a lot of men not good mental spaces. And then that obviously impacts women, right? And everybody around them. So it's like trying to change this narrative around what we tell men what they have to be, and what we tell women what they have to be, because ultimately that's what's really going to change the
Yeah.
workplace. And then not having to be one or the other, and not having characteristics tied to gender in general.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah. You know,
right,
uh, we do have a lot of men who are very caring and very, they care about people, they care about the environment. That's one of the
right,
reasons they're, not using their engineering degrees to go,
no, right,
drill for oil or
right,
push pharmaceuticals or something.
sure,
It's they
sure,
care about people,
sure,
and sometimes it's almost like there's that assumption of like the good guy syndrome, that
right,
that well, I'm a good guy, and
right,
I've hung out with this guy and he seems like a good guy, so I can't imagine that he would ever say something like that.
right,
You must have heard him wrong, or I'm sure
right,
that's what he
right,
meant. And you look at, I've been we're about to get a speaker. It's Jackie Abram is speaking, who wrote Hush Money.
uh-huh,
Amazing little book that, like,
hmm,
every chapter packs a punch of those it tells the story of this woman who just these behind the scenes conversations,
right,
right, when nobody's looking,
right,
and the threats and the implicit threats and
right,
the actions to prevent someone from getting ahead in their
right,
profession, everything. And it's so, and then in public, being able to make it look like, oh yeah, this is for your benefit, oh
right,
well, I know that you've got a sick mom or something, and so this is
right,
for your benefit, and it's
right.
it's exhausting.
It is. I
And then when
agree.
people don't believe you,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, it's like I think about it all the time, I guess. It's because for me, it's like the same thing. I have to always think like, do you understand what's really wrong? Or like, are you just kind of just being placating to me, or just being like appeasing to me? Like it's like, okay, you're nice, I'm nice too, but you know, there's things in our day-to-day behavior that are problematic, and like you have to accept that and how to work on it. And do you accept that or not? Like, you know what I mean? Like that's why I'm just gonna be real with you. It's just like, hey, you're great. I respect you, and the reason why I'm telling you this is because what you say impacts 50% or more of your team in a way that it doesn't impact you. And I get it, it's like all the way over here. Like this is not on your radar because you're not culturated with this. You don't get it. You don't deal with it day
Right.
to day. I did and still do. So I'm telling you, like, what do you care about? Like the intent or like the actual impact you created. Most people who are leaders care about the impact that they create. They don't care about the intent because, I mean, don't be wrong, good intent is a good thing. But
Hmm.
what difference does it make if you impact like a whole group of people you're supposed to work with in a negative way? Oh, I didn't mean it that way. Well, just take ownership of it. It's like you didn't mean it that way, but you hurt these people. So what do you do about it? That's I want the mistake. It's not a big deal. You can be uncertain and be male. It's possible. Trust me. I say I don't know 6,000 times a day, but I also wasn't raised with someone telling me you have to be certain and you can't be weak and you know
Right.
you
Boys don't cry, and then
right.
yeah.
And I wasn't taught that women were objects and that they were people. You know what I mean? Like I wasn't raised in a way to objectify women, even though I'm attracted to people who identify as women.
Right,
It's
right. I
different.
mean, I talked about that of, having the situation. I was just telling someone today that, with my old CEO of the company I used to work for looked me up while I was in grad school and
Mhm.
said, "Hey, I've got a conference in town. Let's have lunch."
Right.
And he had been a professor who had all these geophysics
Hmm.
devices that he was applying to environmental stuff, and then would sometimes go on these archaeological digs with them. And
Hmm.
said, "Hey, I'm going on one of my trips. So would you like to come?" And it's like, "Wow,
Hmm.
that's really cool. Yeah, come expenses. Well, yeah, maybe let's try that." And then he got a little too excited.
Hmm.
And I said, "So you're going to contact so and so, your admin assistant, and then have her book another room?" He's like, "No, you'll stay in my room." And
Oh,
then he
nope.
proceeded to tell me how he used to have sexual fantasies about me at work.
Yeah. See, that's just not.
It's just like,
Yep.
and especially since I knew his wife, I knew his kids,
Right. Oh,
his wife
right.
would throw the holiday parties. I felt
Right.
sick, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the extreme version of that. It's like it goes back to what men are taught. Like it just is, and then some men act on it and some don't. Not most men I interact with are not at that level. They don't think that
Right.
they're untouchable. They're just not. Most of the things
Right.
that they do is they say things that are just not thoughtful or appropriate, and it can be interpreted in a way that could be sexual or could be inappropriate, right? They're like, oh, it was just a joke, but I'm like, yeah, but your audience didn't think it was funny, so they
Well,
think it's
and I
gross. Yeah.
have a theory that, a lot of these microaggressions, it's not so much about getting to the person that it's about.
Right.
It's about seeing who else laughs. It's
Yeah,
about
true.
finding those other allies
True.
and then going and talking to them after and say, this person really doesn't belong here.
Right. Yeah, sure. That can be true too. Yeah, I'm always like assume good intent until I find a reason not to, and then it's a pattern that you just have to be real with people and say, listen, this is like if you want to, be a better person or advance or like be someone that I consider a leader, you need these are the behaviors that need to change. Like because that's not inspiring to me. Like I don't want to work in a place that's hostile. Like that's like when people make jokes about gay people. I mean, which is very predominant in our industry because it's mostly male dominated. Men make homophobic jokes so that way they could project and not say, oh, I'm not in the community. Because to be fair, if men are perceived as gay or feminine or bi, they're demonized. They're considered,
Yeah.
and that's almost the reason why, because they're closer to being like a woman, which is really screwed up. Because I was like, I
Yeah.
don't know. I
Thinking of that
started
like
out
a
life
girl. Yeah.
right. I said I started out life identifying as a woman, and I don't know. I think it made me a better guy or a person. So I don't think there's anything wrong with like embracing your quote unquote feminine side. It actually might make you a better person. I don't know.
Yeah. There has been a lot in the news about trans men, particularly in the sports arena, and it happens that one of the people that I
Mhm.
talked to about Title IX, which
Mhm.
is more than just sports,
Right.
has been working on that. And by the way, I do want to say, my last name is Schreier, Shrier, but it is not. As far as I know, and I call my dad to make sure I'm not in any way related to Abigail Schreier, who's
Oh
written
well.
on, girls who
Yeah.
she
Sure.
didn't transition too soon or whatever her
Yeah.
book is
Sure.
about.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah. I mean, I mean, I'm not. I mean, I go with kind of the Olympics on this one. Like, like I think that they're just like, hey, we don't really know a lot about how being trans either enhances or de-enhances your performance. They look at it from, in my opinion, in a very logical way based on hormone levels. And if you're, and I mean, and if you look at like past trans people who've like, I don't know if you remember, but there was a weightlifter or a heavy lifter from New Zealand, and she was a trans woman, and she suppressed her testosterone. She had like normal levels of testosterone for a woman and levels of estrogen in a woman. And everyone made this huge big deal about her competing in New Zealand and for the Olympics. I'm like, okay. And she didn't even place. So to me, it's just like the only time people care about women's sports is when trans people are trying to participate. And I think that's a really screwed up narrative. just gonna be real with you. It just what it means is I don't care about women's sports until someone I perceive as male is trying to enter this sport. So, I mean, I think that's kind of a fair thing to say. Does anyone care about women's
Some people care
weightlifting?
about women's sports, and
Yeah,
more than we used to. I mean,
right.
we're making a lot of progress, right?
Yeah, I know, but you get what I'm saying. It's just like it's ridiculous. But I'm not gonna say I understand fully the capabilities of like trans people and competing in sports. I think it's fine if you follow basic rules and let people do. And most of these people are children, so who cares? I mean, that's how I look at it. It's not as simple, but who knows? I mean, I think they just have to figure a lot of things out. But for me,
I mean, a lot of swimmers and who's in the changing rooms, and some
to
of that
me,
is
to me, it's just mostly I mean, I don't know. I kind of look at it this way. It's like you can't really use biological sex as an excuse because, you know, you don't really know what people have. I mean, people could be intersex. They could be lots of different things. Like actually, a lot of people are born with ambiguous parts in general. So it's like, to me, I'm like, okay. And if they're children, it's like kind of even really less relevant. So it's just to me, I never really get it. It's like I feel it's a very American thing. Like, I think it's a very American thing where like your bodies are very taboo and God forbid like we have any level of like physical contact with the opposite
I mean, do you feel
sex.
comfortable, yeah, when
So
you
for
guys are
me,
all changing
I
together
mean,
and
I
all
think
that?
that's a good question to ask because do I feel comfortable in being in all male spaces? No. But the
I mean,
reason
especially the locker room where the guys are taking everything off and they're zapping each other with towels and they're,
it actually has nothing
whatever.
to do with what they're doing. It has to do
Yeah,
with the fact that um I was, women or I mean, rightfully so to some degree. I'm not trying to say that men are inherently dangerous. I don't believe in that narrative. I'm not going to
yeah,
teach that narrative. I don't think men are inherently dangerous, but I
right.
understand why women fear men. I understand it, and some of it, just like with even your experience, that's gross. So I would get being, hesitant, right, to engage
Hmm.
in something like to go on a trip with another professor, right? I would be hesitant with that. For me, I'm apprehensive because I have to worry about my personal safety because my identity is politicized and people hurt people like me, they kill them. So, and generally, people who do that are men.
Right.
It's just as simple as that, unfortunately. And that's because we teach men that being aggressive towards people and women or people they view as women is okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I have to.
Sure.
Yeah. So vice versa for trans women too. I mean, they're supposed to be male presenting and they're feminine, so automatically people who are homophobic or transphobic are gonna be violent towards them. So no, I'm
And
not.
you do, yeah, yeah. And so you're not all changing it. I mean, I worked in the Canadian oil sands, and we
Yeah.
had situations where we'd have
Mhm.
a woman geologist go up and get kicked off by the
Right.
the site
Right.
boss, right?
Right.
We don't allow women on site,
Right. Yeah. Mhm.
and when you're trying to build your career,
Mhm.
there are times when you need to go where the client is, you go where the
Right.
site is,
Right.
we in water, we're dealing with a lot of remote locations, we're
Right.
dealing with pump stations, we're dealing with treatment stations, we're
Right.
dealing with things out in the middle of nowhere. We're going to be talking with someone from Metropolitan Water District of
Oh,
Southern California,
cool.
and so, I mean, I haven't heard anyone talk about that. I'm glad that you seem to recognize the story of what happened, all the
Yeah.
LA Times stories, and
Mhm. Yeah.
and and it change in leadership. But are they putting in place the procedures to prevent retaliation if
Yeah.
women are getting, so basically that women were getting harassed, assaulted, and when they reported were
Right.
retaliated against, right?
Right, exactly. And the reality of it is when I think about trans people, and just to answer your question, it's just like it's not it's no one's getting harassed or hurt by the trans people. We're the ones that are getting hurt. So I want to just make that statistically that is proven. Like, so it's not really, I guess, fair, I guess, to say, oh, it's just we don't want the sexes to mix. It's it's really, the narrative should be around, oh, we should make sure the trans person doesn't get like harassed or like killed, right? There's no, but having a trans person in a restaurant or training in and of itself is not going to cause what a lot of people think. I used to leave these cards that said, "Hey, I'm a trans person and I used a restroom and you were fine." Like, I used to leave them around the sink, and like guys would pick them up and they would look at them, and I would watch because everyone said, I don't look, whatever that means, trans. I'm invisible. Like no one stops and looks at me. Like I have a huge freaking beard and I have a deep voice, so and I have no breasts, so
Impressive. Like a Sikh would be very jealous, I think.
yeah, a lot of guys are, but like they just look around, they're just like, what the hell? And I'm just like, yeah, you were fine. You know what I mean? It's just stupid. So, anyways, it's always the narratives about the majority versus the marginalized minorities. So,
As far as the strengths aspect, I mean, was it noticeable difference in being able to, you're out in the field, you're lifting things. And of course, there are a lot of guys who lift things they shouldn't be lifting and then they get hurt. But, but
if you're asking, I mean, not all trans people transition medically. So just FYI, I chose to just because for me it was something I needed to do to feel comfortable in my own body, because I had gender dysphoria. So if I didn't do it, I probably would be here today, or I would not be working or like probably mentally stable. So, and back when I was diagnosed with, back I had to see a therapist for a minimum of 3 months, and it was considered a mental disorder. Being trans was considered a mental disorder up in 2019. So now it's more considered a medical related thing. So, and medical transition is usually what helps most trans people. So, um, so I mean, when you take any type of hormone, you're going to take on some of the characteristics of the, quote unquote opposite sex. Am I a little bit stronger? Yeah, but I'm not going to be lifting 100 pounds or 400 pounds anytime soon unless I train for that, just like women. And your hormone levels change depending on how you eat and like work out and do that kind of stuff. So I don't have estrogen in my system now just because I don't have those, I don't have that chemistry anymore. But I mean, my voice is deeper. I have hair. I basically got the things that I would have gotten being male, except I don't have height. Like it doesn't change your bone structure or like how you function, basically. So yeah. So, but yeah, there's differences. I notice things like maybe I could lift like maybe 10 or 15 pounds more than I could before, basically.
yeah.
But
and you, and you've become, because you've got support from your company, first of all, and that makes a difference. And I think I first met you in one of the diversity sessions at AWWA. And typically one of the things we said about the summit is not just celebrations and success stories.
yeah, right.
But don't complain about it. Don't say anything that might upset anyone or controversial anything.
Right.
But yeah, you were talking about some things that Black and Beach was doing as an example of how companies can be supportive, right?
Yeah. So really, at the end of the day, a company or a group of people could be supportive, but really at the end of the day, it's your day-to-day people that you interact with that really affect if you feel safe or not. So just because a company has things in place for trans people doesn't necessarily make it a trans-friendly environment. It's kind of hard, actually. Usually, like when trans people are looking for a job, they try to talk to a lot of people who are in the queer demographic or LGBTQA plus demographic to figure out how they are. I mean, I guess a lot of the people that I work with are just respectful. I think a lot of them were very uncomfortable, and I appreciate that because I was very uncomfortable as a trans person. So, because I had a lot of hesitation telling anybody, because for me, I just greatly feared losing my job, which happens to trans people a lot. Trans people tend to be more unemployed than our cisgender counterparts. In America, especially, I think it's like 4 times higher than the national average of unemployment for trans people, I believe. So for me, I just really feared like my not having my career, not having a job, or something that I worked really hard for, or losing a lot of my friends and my family and stuff like that. And some people I did lose. Some people's respected industry I did lose. I lost job opportunities. I lost a lot of things, but that's okay because I don't really care. I mean, I'm lucky. I still landed on my feet. Still, I'm probably the most privileged part of this whole group, so there's a lot to do with that. But for me, the general people around me just wanted to address me the way I wanted and just be respectful. So that I had that going for me. Um, and then it just takes time for people to understand what trans people need in the workplace, which is like access to medical care, just like women need. Access to just being who we are, being addressed the way we are, people using our pronouns, people not making microaggression comments about how we dress or how we look, or saying, "Oh, I had no idea you're trans." Like, that's a compliment. It's not a compliment. Don't say that, trans people. It's not a compliment when people say they don't know or they act shocked. It's like, okay, you couldn't tell. You're not supposed to be able to tell. And if you can tell, that person doesn't pass, and that's a really hard existence to live in, especially if we're talking about a binary world. So focusing on what trans people look like. I mean, it's one thing to say, "Hey, you look nice in that shirt," or "Hey, I like your hair." You know what I mean? You don't have to like walk on eggshells, but don't specifically target it towards like, "Oh, you look good for a trans guy." I mean, no one wants that. I don't want those compliments. I also do not want to be told I'm brave for
you look like an old lady. Yeah.
Yeah, don't come up to me and say I'm brave. I'm just living my life like everybody else. Like, if I inspire you, great, but like, I'm not a brave person. I'm just living my life, doing what I do. So it's just one of those things. But I mean, companies can definitely help by making sure that trans people have access to medical care by not having it be a policy exclusion. That's a big thing. A lot of what trans people get, they don't have coverage to, and even when they do get insurance coverage, it's very expensive. So that's one barrier that a workplace could do. I have that, but a lot of those benefits were really championed by people that needed them. So people like me within organizations like where I work, championing a lot of that stuff, and just working on people's day to day, just working with them, because there were some people who really weren't happy that I was around. I'm sure you can't make everyone happy. Like, people have their own biases, their own experience of trans people, their own perception of what trans people are, because up until now, if you would watch television, like in the early 90s or 80s, trans people were like three things: sex workers, drug addicts, murder victims. That's it. There were no positive trans people. I mean, even still today, it's not.
Or the murderers themselves,
Right. Exactly. Or they're villains. Exactly.
Yeah.
They have some mental. Exactly. They're villains. They're scary people. You should fear them. That's the message. They're either low. They're low class people. They're just, which is sad. So I grew up with that narrative too. So having to get over that, and it's hard. So anyways, that's pretty much it.
The fact that this is out in the open more than it has been, and you have more, in addition to, people may not be saying openly who are themselves LGBTQ plus, but people who have family members. Has that really been a factor? You get a lot of people who are allies because they have an experience with a family member, friend who came out with something.
Yes, of course. Most people generally only care about other people if they have an association with the group, which doesn't make you an ally outright. Like, I tell people that all the time. Just because you know gay people doesn't make you an ally. You got to do more than just that.
Right.
Which is for a trans person.
I had someone in leadership tell me that, I can't be sexist. My sister's gay. And it's exactly. No, but that didn't change the fact that nobody said anything when the board meeting and everyone's talking about the three chicks in the elevator, when they're roasting the guy who's retiring.
Right. Your association to me doesn't make you a better ally. What your actions and what you say does. So that's why I say, it's just, you can know 100 trans people and still be a transphobic person. And still say transphobic things and not know it or know it. I mean, that's just the truth. So
yeah,
go ahead.
Let's pronouns. And sorry.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
And I mean, this is something, and we talked a lot about generations, and we do actually have a very broad spectrum of, we got 50 people on this I was going to say 50 women, not to say 50 people. Thank you very much.
Yeah, 50 people. Yep.
50 amazing women and one trans man. I don't know. I don't know how we'll say that. Whatever. I got to put together all the marketing materials and everything.
Folks.
But
50 folks.
yeah. But
Yep.
So the younger generations are like really, some of them very militant about making sure everyone's got the pronouns on and that they're correct. And, it's on everything. It's on, LinkedIn, it's on the name tags, correcting people if they get it wrong, screenshotting if somebody does the wrong thing. And then if you delete it later, they can still show the screenshot.
Right.
And we're still fighting a lot of other battles in terms of trying to have a safe space to work, trying to get accepted and be able to fully express our capabilities and move up in the ranks and everything. And sometimes it almost feels like we're fighting the battles and forgetting about the war.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, pronouns are important. Addressing people correctly is important. Giving people grace when they screw up is important. Some trans people can do that, some can't. I think you just have to understand that we don't control how we trigger people. We just don't know. Yeah. But if someone is triggered, it usually means that's been done to them 1,000 times and you're just 1,001 time, and that just broke, their ability to show up that day and have empathy for that. So, I think it's focusing on trying to address people correctly and just owning the mistake. It's like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do that. I'm going to, do the best I can to, and I have to do it too. I mean, it's not like because I'm a trans person, I get everybody right. I've misgendered people and just said, listen, I'm sorry. It's my bad. It is. And I know what it's like and it sucks. So I'm really sorry. I truly didn't mean to do that. I think, it's just, you have to just take ownership of it and just try your best to do better. And I think most people understand that. I think it's a lot of people don't take ownership. They try to make it the other person's fault. And I think that's when they're like, oh, well, I can't keep track of all this stuff. Like I've had people call me a she, a he, an it, a that. I mean, things that you should never, it and that is something you should never call another person because that's like referring to like an object. But like for me, I'm just like, okay, if you're trying, I'm going to give you grace and help you. So, and that's it. And I'm able to do that. Not everyone has the mental capacity to do that. So you're going to get some of that, but I think some of it is just owning it and saying, okay, this is important to you and I need to do my best to respect you. That's respect. But I do feel most trans people, or I can speak for myself, pronouns were never really super important to me, or at least up until now. Maybe when I was transitioning and I was just fearful that if you called me the wrong one, that would make me acceptable to violence. That's all. Like if I was like always a he, then people would leave me alone. Or if there was any back and forth, I just was worried that would draw attention to me, or attention that I did not want. So that was really just personal safety at the end of the day is why I kind of cared about pronouns at the beginning. Now I really don't care. But I just want to be able to live my life and not fear people using it against me or trying to blackmail me because they think that it's a bargaining tool of power over me, kind of thing. Like, or I'm not as preferred because I'm not cisgender, or, just stuff like that. Like I just want to be able to live my life and not fear day to day that me being a trans person is going to impact my employment or my access to medical care or just walking around the street safely. And I think sometimes like those things aren't the focus all the time. We don't focus on those things because a lot of people don't understand what it's like to live in this existence.
Yeah.
So I kind of feel like it's about respect, and sometimes respect starts with like how we actually address people and talk to people and try to at least respect their existence. I feel like that translates in almost everything.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I mostly just want people to get at is that how people perceive you is how they're going to treat you. If they perceive you as female, they're going to treat you like you're a woman, and whatever that means to them. If they're male, they're going to treat you a certain way. If they identify female, they're probably going to treat you in a different way. If they don't know what you are, the treatment's not going to be good in general. that's the scariest existence I've lived. People were not kind to someone that looks gender ambiguous. Did not like
Right.
that. And now male, which is what I'm not perceived as now, that's how I identify, is I get treated the best in this existence
Yeah.
because it's
Yeah.
preferred.
Yeah.
So that's really the key that you gotta understand about this is I've seen it and I know I'm like, oh, I was treated the worst when people identified as female and queer or lesbian, and I got treated really bad when people couldn't identify what I was. It was a very scary time in my life. And now that I'm perceived as male and probably straight or maybe gay, I don't really care. People don't really screw with me now. So I'm like invisible.
When did you get the beard? That's a really impressive beard. I
So I started growing my beard when I lived in Colorado. So that's 2011 through 2000, like 2011 basically is when I started.
okay.
So,
Yeah. Well, that's a very cool beard.
thanks.
Um, so yeah, I think it's important, we have been talking throughout the event about
Hmm.
creating safe spaces,
Hmm.
being inclusive,
Hmm.
and I'm figuring out what's headed now with your career path. You got this opportunity. You're doing all the work with all the operators and do
Hmm.
training for Black and Beach when they have new plants coming online and whatnot.
Yep.
You've got your activity with American Water Works Association, and
Hmm.
I think we weren't recording it. Tell everybody what you're doing with AWWA.
Oh, so I'm a director at large for the association. So that means I sit on the board. And then I'm a vice president until ACE 2024. So I sit on the executive committee of AWWA. So that's basically like below the president, the treasurer, like we call that the poets. That's the top of the association. So yeah, but I've been a volunteer probably for 18 years or so. I've been involved with AWW ever since I was in grad school. So, and I've been a member of probably 5 or 6 sections to date because I've lived in 9 states so far. So, I do a lot in that arena. So I'm pretty involved in water, but I've been
Yeah,
involved
yeah.
through my entire transition basically. So,
We had a chance to talk with Jackie Gerald, who had been president of
mhm,
WEF, and one of the things we talked about is when we get into get out of the office around people we know, and we get into the big
mhm,
conference environment,
right.
right? Lots of people, the big expo hall and all the technical sessions and everything.
Mhm.
Um, Sometimes alcohol flowing, people
Yep.
might behave in ways that they don't at other places.
Mhm.
Has that been ever a place where you run into negative experiences or positive
Yes.
experiences connecting with other folks from around the country?
Yeah, I'm not really a big drinker. But I do go to events where people drink, sometimes really heavily. I mean, it's the typical things that I see, things that I no longer have to deal with, like, people getting too close to people in their personal spaces or like say what they really think or feel. And I'm just like, I don't know. I kind of just act like this buffer. I'm just like, okay, you're obviously drunk, so maybe you should go off and do something else. I don't know. Go sleep it off, bro. Like, you just need to be like, go away because that's not appropriate. But I always see how alcohol makes things like, you know, worse, usually, not really better. I mean, I don't know. I've had drinks to celebrate stuff, but like usually when you have alcohol and with like a mixed group of people, especially in a professional setting, it's something inappropriate is going to happen usually. I mean,
Or,
it's just
or it's kind
true.
of used as an excuse to say, "Oh yeah, I
That's
don't remember
correct.
because I was drunk."
That's
That's not
correct. Yeah.
exactly what they're doing.
Yeah.
It's
That's
not
correct.
all
Yeah.
blacking out. It's like, what? No.
Right. Well, what it comes
Um,
down to is people, they don't, they're just not accountable for their own personal behavior because they think, well, I didn't mean it that way, so therefore you shouldn't take it that way. But you don't know what that person's been dealing with. Like, I mean, women get solicited all the time. Trans people get solicited all the time. I've been solicited. I know what it's like. It's not fun. It's not a compliment.
mm, yeah,
Like, it's
yeah,
we don't want it. We're at work. We're here
right.
to do a job. We're not here to be like an object or a centerpiece or like my like attractiveness shouldn't really be. the focal point of this. It's
Right.
a work thing. And I don't
And one
understand
thing,
that.
yeah,
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
no, you were gonna say you don't understand.
I don't understand it because I wasn't raised man. I'm not acculturated as a man. It's very hard for me to understand it. I don't see women. I mean, I'm not saying all men see women as objects, but it's not a problem. It's not something I understand. Just like I don't understand what it's like to be told you can't cry or you're weak or like you shouldn't want to do these things or like, you know what I mean? Like that doesn't exist in my reality. So like I have a hard time relating to men because I don't have to deal with traditional masculinity expectations. They do, which is sad in some
Right,
ways.
right.
They have to deal with that. That's hard for them.
Yeah, and I absolutely agree that, men don't have it easy.
No.
And it is tough, this is it can be a very competitive business.
Yep.
Men are worried about losing their jobs. Men are
Right.
worried about uh, you know, pressure to meet a deadline, or
Right.
losing a client, or somebody coming in and taking over their practice area or presenting. I mean, they've got their pressures as well. And
Right.
and it's not easy for women when somebody presents your
Right.
paper as their own or whatever.
Yeah, I mean,
um
I guess
but
the moral of the story is everybody polices gender. So when women police quote unquote men that they're not masculine enough or not fitting into what their version of masculinity is, you're reinforcing all of these behaviors that we don't necessarily want in the workplace. Because to be male is not bad. Just
yeah.
yeah, to be male in and of itself is not a bad thing. Just like being female in and of itself is not a bad thing. Being non-binary in itself is not a bad thing. It's the thing we attach to those behaviors that are not good, depending on what we're talking about, that make, you know, all these roles and expectations are really the problem. Being male in and of itself is fine. So
Mhm.
yeah, masculinity is not the problem.
Well,
It's
yeah,
the roles we place on
it's something you
masculinity that's the
wanted.
problem. Yeah.
So, yeah, and one of the things that we that WEF did at the last meeting, and it was the first time I ever seen it at one of these big conferences, was they had an ombudsman.
Okay.
And they had a room, and it took a while for me to find. It was like in between sections of floors and off of the out of the way place, which apparently was partly on purpose so people wouldn't see you walking in if somebody had an issue or something.
Right.
It was also very clear that this was not someone who was going to actually act on anything. It's just kind of more like a sounding board.
Right.
But I before I went, I wrote about it and said, hey, congratulations to WEF for having what I think is the first time I've ever seen an ombudsman at an event. It might be something for AWWA to think about. And the people who responded were men.
Okay.
Men who had been in those situations where they
Right.
had stepped in, where somebody who perhaps had a little too much to drink, perhaps was,
Right.
all over one of the,
Right.
women trying to, man, try to,
Right. Yep.
so man the booth, trying to,
Right.
just work at their booth,
Right.
in the expo hall, and,
Yep.
guys falling into the elevator, trying to follow
Yep.
them into the room, and, that
Right.
men step in and
Yep.
feel like they have to help, and
Right.
which is not the safest position for men
Nope.
either.
Nope. It's not. Yeah, and a lot of men want to help, they just don't know how. So a lot of times that's what I kind of tell, like they'll ask me, like, what should I do? And I said, well, if you feel like someone's being threatened or getting attention they don't want, usually what I do, especially if they're like drunk, like I'm like, oh buddy, how's it going? Like I put myself in between the two of them. I'm like, oh man, it's good to see you. And I distract the crap out of them. And then we're like, oh, we gotta go get a drink or we gotta get something to eat. And they're, wasted. So they just walk away. So it's just like, you know what I mean? It's like those kinds of things where I'm just like, then, I usually say, hey, are you okay? Like kind of thing. Like,
Right.
yeah, I'll say, hey, I need to see her for a minute. We'll be right back. Sometimes I just help
Yeah.
people just leave that situation if they want. Like, there's ways of going about it. So yeah, I think that's great. I mean, I love hearing
Yeah.
that. That's really awesome.
And it's, and so often when these situations happen, women don't report it, they don't
Right.
speak up, they're worried about retaliation,
Yep.
or that somehow responsibilities are gonna be taken away because people
Right.
think they can't handle it,
Right.
or that, oh, well, you're not going to be safe, so we won't send you out in the field.
Right.
And that really affects your ability as a water and environmental professional to
Right.
advance. Right.
But it also affects the person who's doing these things. They need
Right.
to understand, like, and be invested in. I said, you're not even giving this person a chance to do better. They don't even know what they're doing is potentially making a person feel this way. Like, don't rob them. I mean, it's one thing if they don't care and that, you know what I mean? You handle that differently. But that's not usually the individuals I'm dealing with most of the time. These people are saying things or doing things that they're not aware are producing this impact. And I said, do you understand, like, when you say this is how these other people feel when you say that? Because no one tells them.
Right.
People either shelter them from it or no one tells them because of the reasons you just said. So it's like,
Right.
hey, it takes somebody to say, listen, that's not cool, dude. Like, what are you doing? Like, you're putting your foot in your mouth. Stop. Stop. No. Shut up.
Hard thing to do.
Yeah.
But those things, bullying, standing over, especially vertically challenged.
Yeah.
Guys use their height to stand over someone, and their arms are out, like they're going to hit them, and it just, especially if anyone's had any kind of violence against them in the past, ever been hit before. It is just, immediately into fight or flight, and it's not a way to get someone to meet a deadline.
Yeah, right. I'm just like, whoever taught you that being masculine means to be aggressive is wrong. Because I tell people, I'm like, whoever told you that, I'm sorry. That sucks for you. No one ever told me that. I don't have to live with that I have to be aggressive to be male. I don't have any hangups when it comes to masculinity at all. I do not care if I fit in this box, but I was also not told since I was born that I have to do these things. And I have a lot of empathy for that. And it can be learned. That's the beauty of it. It's behavior. You can learn it.
Very cool. I do want to ask you about the behavior of your water bears.
Uh-huh.
You want to tell people what those
Wall and Wanda right there. Yeah, Wall and Wanda. They're my two stuffed animals. They're water bears. I love them. They're like my little, I don't know. I call them my industry mascots. I love them for many reasons. I mean, if you don't know what a water bear is or a tardigrade, they're basically these micro animals that they're in wastewater and they like eat like stuff in the wastewater, but they're very resilient animals. They can survive space, radiation, vacuum environments with no water. They just like adapt, and that's why I love them. They're very resilient creatures, and I kind of attach them to people in the industry because they remind me of all of you. All of you are very resilient people, like resourceful people, like people that had to do a lot when COVID was going on and still do more with less, way more with a lot less. So that's why I really love the water bears, and they're cute. Like Walla Wanda are adorable. They're the best. They travel with me. They're going to come with me to my next. I'm going to the New Jersey AWWA conference as a visiting officer there. So I usually bring them and put them on the podium and just like, hey, here's Walla Wanda. You all are going to have to meet them. You can't get around it. I love them.
If they're doing something there that we need to put an X-rated.
I just like put them in a pile. They're not they're not gender specific. So they're stuffed animals that love each other. I love them. I don't know. They're around here somewhere. I think they're on my desk somewhere. But they're cool. I love them. They're great creatures.
Awesome. Well, any last word of advice for our audience? As I just hope we can create a better industry, a better society where people who have, especially those of us who are working in some really important challenges, climate change, aging infrastructure, emerging contaminants, these are our mission. And anyone who steps up to meet that mission, to be part of a team, to be part of an industry, to be part of a profession, and do things that are so critical right now, to be able to do so in a way that supports them.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I don't know. What I always tell people is, try to be open to different people, whatever that means to you. Like, it's not just gender. There's differences matter. They're important. Embracing the different things about people is what brings us together. Commonality. Don't let people polarize you. Like, don't fall for it. Like I tell people that all the time. Don't fall for polarizing things. It's not important. And if you're male identifying and watching this, look, try to understand how you behave and how you impact others, and no matter who you are, really. I mean, women can be sexist too towards each other, and sometimes women are also detrimental to each other because of a system that is in place trying to be competitive too. We don't really ever talk about that a lot of the times, but it's there. So I think you just got to support one another. Talk about men. If you supervise women, don't just mentor them, talk about them when they're not there. That women are over mentored and under promoted, and there's a reason why. They have to be sponsored. You have to talk and say this person is doing great and not assume that they're not going to want to take on a role because they have children or things that women traditionally end up doing. Like, you can't make assumptions about people is really universally what I'm saying. Many people have made assumptions about how I identify or who I'm attached to and have been completely wrong. I have like a slide of like 20 identities people thought I was. And I'm like, I've only identified as 3 of these things on the whole list. So for me, not assuming what I can and can't do based on what I am or what's going on in my life is really key for anybody. Because we do it to men too. It's not just a women thing. It's just we're in an environment where men mostly control those decisions right now. So I would just say, be who you are as much as you can. But if you're queer or you're an LGBTQIA community, I understand that you can't do that. I would never promote outing yourself in a situation that's not safe. Or unfortunately, that's just the world we live in. So it's definitely a personal choice. So make sure that you think about it. Make sure you don't out other people without them knowing. It's really dangerous in this industry and in general. And I don't know, just try to little by little chip away at this issue.
Yeah.
I guess I don't know how else to say it.
And for a long time, even when I started Water Citizen 10 years ago, and even just talking about women in leadership, there was that implicit or sometimes explicit threat that
Yeah.
I wouldn't get a press pass. I would have my press pass taken away, or
Right.
people demanding, getting cornered by an officer of a association
Right.
to demanding to know
Right.
who's paying for this and who's controlling this, and I
Right.
must be a front for someone.
Right.
And I mean, one of the reasons I didn't get this summit started is I was applying for a job, and I was worried that if I
Yeah, I get
started
it.
working on this, would that affect whether I got the job, which I don't think I at this point anyways.
Well, yeah,
So
no, I'm with you.
yeah.
I get it. It's like you have to second guess yourself. It's like, if I do these things, what am I not going to get? I mean, I get it. Trust me, I have those conversations all the time with myself. Like, if I'm open about who I am and my experience with that, what am I not going to get out of my career or life? I mean, that's just the reality of it. And I paid some of that. I get it.
Yeah.
It's just, you have to first be safe. Second, if you have a voice and you have a place of privilege within whatever community that is, if that's a race privilege, or everyone has privilege, right? If you're in that, then you're the one that has to speak up for others. That's just how it is. It's the only way we rise. It's if we rise together. As trite as that sounds, it's true.
Beautiful. We'll leave it at that. I love it. Ari, thank you so much. Thank you for your openness. Thank you for
Sure.
joining us in this exploration of how do we get the how do we not like the best and the brightest of the industry, and wonderful people that we have,
Mhm.
we've said often throughout the summit that you talk to one woman, and we all have
Right.
different life experiences
Right.
and different journeys, and it's not a pipeline. It's just a one
Right.
straight line that you have to be straight down
Right.
that line,
Yep.
straight and anyways.
True.
But yeah, so folks, thank you so much for joining us today, and please do type in the chat any questions, comments, your experiences, to the extent you're comfortable with that. Ariel will be able to see any of the comments and respond, and keep coming back and check out all the great content we have here at the summit. Take care.
Yeah. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks so much for joining us for this extraordinary conversation, one of 45 extraordinary conversations we had as part of the Women of Water Get Real virtual summit, where we explored where and why women are leaking from the water career pipeline, how we can stop those leaks, and even bring women back to water. I hope that you will enjoy all of these amazing interviews. If you don't have a chance to watch all of them during the summit, you have the opportunity to join us with a power pack and get lifetime access to all the videos, as well as an opportunity to join us for 30 days in a brand new community where we will dig even deeper in live facilitated conversations about some of the issues that are facing women in water. Look forward to seeing you there. Please join us at watercitizen.org/women, watercitizen.org/women for more information. See you again soon.